Our top story on World DNA this morning, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of plotting potentially catastrophic attacks on Ukrainian nuclear plants.
But in his address to world leaders at the UNGA, Zelensky said that Moscow is planning attacks on Kiev's nuclear power plants and infrastructure, aiming to disconnect the plants from the power grid. Zelensky added that any missile or drone strike or any critical incident in the energy system could lead to a nuclear disaster, warning that a day like that must never come.
Recently, I received yet another alarming report from our intelligence. Now Putin does seem to be planning attacks on our nuclear power plants and their infrastructure, aiming to disconnect the plants from the power grid. With the help of satellites, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, satellites of other countries. Russia is getting images and detailed information about the infrastructure of our nuclear power plants.
Shortly after the Ukrainian president's remarks, his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin made his most explicit threat yet over the use of nuclear weapons, saying Russia would consider such a response to a massive air attack on its soil.
The updated version of the document proposes that the aggression against Russia by any non-nuclear weapon state, but with the participation or support of a nuclear weapon state, should be regarded as a joint attack on the Russian Federation. The conditions for Russia's transition to the use of nuclear weapons are also clearly defined. We will consider such a possibility as soon as we receive reliable information about a massive launch of aerospace attack means and their crossing of our state border.
Ukraine has been pushing the United States and its allies to ease restrictions on weapons that can be used to strike deeper inside Russia. Soon after Zelensky's UN address, President Joe Biden's administration promised new military aid for Ukraine.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has announced $375 million in military aid for Ukraine. This package includes HIMARS precision rocket launchers, cluster munitions and light tactical vehicles, assuring that the United States is committed to Ukraine's defense against what he called Russia's brutal aggression. Blinken said that Washington would deploy this new assistance as quickly as possible.
This is likely to be the last such visit before the November elections in the US that could shape Washington's policy on Kiev. Zelensky is set to soon meet President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and he will present his victory plan.
The aid package comes as Ukraine frets that a second Donald Trump presidency could loosen the United States' commitment. Trump has repeatedly praised Russian President Vladimir Putin and has refused to take a side in this war. As Kyiv seeks to cover all political bases, Zelensky plans to meet the former president during his visit as well. For more on this, we're now being joined by Charles Kupchan from Sarajevo. He is a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. He's also the former special assistant to the President and Senior Director for European Affairs on the state of the National Security Council in the Barack Obama administration. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA. It's a pleasure to have you. Now, sir, we've been hearing about this victory plan for quite some time. Now, Zelensky is trying to cover all bases. What I want to understand is, what do you think a victory plan would entail?
Well, we don't really know yet. Zelensky has been talking about this so-called plan for almost a month now, but he is waiting to expose the details until he meets with President Biden in Washington tomorrow on Thursday, Washington time. From what we can gather, Zelensky is going to ask for permission to take deep strikes on Russian territory using U.S.-provided weapons. He's going to ask for more economic and military assistance. He appears to be ready to ask for some kind of formal commitment to be invited to join NATO, Ukrainian membership in NATO. Whether there is also some kind of proposal to move to diplomacy, to directly engage Russia in a dialogue, we don't know. He did say after the last peace summit in Switzerland that he wanted Russia to participate in the next one. But whether he actually has a concrete plan for engaging Russia at this point remains unclear. We may know more after the meeting with Biden.
Mr. Kapchan, now certain reports suggest that Trump has declined to meet with Zelensky to discuss Ukraine's victory plan. And now, do you feel this is like this last-ditch effort by Zelensky to gain as much support while Biden is in office?
Well, I think a couple things are going on. One is that Zelensky wants to keep open a channel of communication with Trump and Trump's team, because obviously nobody knows who's going to be the next president of the United States. And Zelensky knows that the glide path here in the United States, and in Europe for that matter, when it comes to the future provision of aid, is not as assured as it's been in the past. This last aid package put 7 months to get approval in the U.S. House. Republicans are generally opposed to large aid packages for Ukraine. So I think he's trying to rally support in the American public, because there will be a new ask for assistance, probably late this year or early next year. And he's trying to get as much as he can out of Joe Biden, because he knows that Joe Biden is a very, very strong supporter of Ukraine. And maybe this is a last chance to get in certain kinds of assistance and perhaps approval to hit Russian territory with long-range weapons.
Right, sir. I also want to understand, as per Zelensky, Russia can be pushed into diplomatic peace if the West strengthens Ukraine's position. Do you feel a show of strength is the way to go forward and to achieve peace with a country like Russia?
I think it's the only way forward. We don't know what Putin's war aims are, but I think it's safe to say that he ultimately would like to topple the government, turn Ukraine into a failed state, turn Ukraine into a subjugated state. And the best way to tell him that that's not going to happen is to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs to protect itself. I think that the term victory plan is probably a misnomer, in the sense that I'm guessing what's going on behind the scenes is to put Ukraine in as best a position as possible to block any further Russian advances, make it clear to Putin that he's not going to get any further. And then at that time, that's when you try to negotiate a ceasefire, when you have maximum negotiating leverage in Kyiv.
All right, we hear you, Mr. Kapchan. Thank you so much for joining us right here on World DNA. It's always a pleasure hearing your thoughts on current issues.
Good to be with you.